Welcome to Hunt Harvest Health, the podcast with your host, Ryan Lampers, aka the StHealthy Hunter.
Howdy.
And myself, Dr. Hillary Lampers, where we share our love for ancestral living and the health topics of the modern age. Ryan is the well-rounded bearded brawn of Hunt Harvest Health. His knowledge of backcountry adventure, western hunting, and our household status as garden guru and super dad really defines our gut stealthy lifestyle.
Doc Hillary is definitely the brains and beauty behind all of this. She kind of makes everything happen, as I have zero technical skills. Hill is just a wealth of knowledge in all things medicine and nutrition, which not only keep our family healthy, but they help me stay strong in all my mountain adventures.
You can follow us at huntharvesthealth.com, Instagram, and Facebook for more podcasts, recipes, and stories.
All right, let's do this.
Well, folks, we're back. Actually, we should be coming back more often, but yeah, we're here. So we're just going to do a short intro on this one because it kind of like tail ends on our last podcast. This is going to be a more in-depth podcast with our friend Jordan Reesner, co-creator of Humble Foods. In this podcast, we're going to go a little bit deeper into his health condition and the celiac disease that really has led him to creating Humble Foods and why the ingredients are as good as they are. So we talk about that. We go on a bunch of rants about health stuff, which I'm good at.
Talk a little bit of mental toughness.
Mm-hmm.
He's well trained and does a lot of Spartan races and tough challenges and courses.
Yeah. We did the interview in his workout room, so he talks about some of the cool I was going to call it new age, but these are really cool things that are coming out to help athletes like train at altitude and all kinds of stuff, hyperbaric, just muscle recovery and improve function. But that was a pretty cool workout room. He had like rings in there and he could shoot his arrows in there. And
yeah, it's the ultimate man's room.
Yeah.
You got all the workout equipment.
And he's organized, unlike us.
Yeah, I envy him.
He's one of those has the boxes that are labeled, and I'm sure he counts how many screws or tacks or whatever's in a box, and then he's got it numbered. It's crazy.
Yeah, I can never see my hunting room being that well organized.
I would just I think I would pay money to have somebody do that, but the problem is maintaining it. You got to actually be an organized person to keep it up, every time you go in that room, you put it exactly where you found it.
I got my room right now with my hunting gear. I've got a massive pile with one of my tents is pulled out. And
I think you and Gritty and Corey Jakes just talked about this topic in a recent podcast with him. It's you're a piler and the piles are everywhere. And that's one of the first things I noticed when I go into we went and did that room up in Jordan's house, and it was everything was in its place. I mean, the weights were even lined up perfectly on the floor. And I'm wow, this is really cool.
A thing of beauty.
I think if it was just Ryan and I wasn't in the picture, it was him and the kids, he'd walk in and be landmines, piles of stuff everywhere.
I think you're wrong. I think if it was just me and I did not know you and I was a single guy, I'd probably be pretty dang organized. But, I already got you, so I've got piles everywhere. And
where
are you going?
You have you've trained those kids too to just leave your pile on the floor. Your mom will pick it up. Don't worry. Yeah. You and Paley have the same disease, I call it. Just piler disease. The piler disease. Anyways, how we got off on that, I'm really sorry, Jordan. But he's very organized. And we touch on a few other things in there. He loves elk hunting. That's really his passion. And where he comes from in the Midwest and his history with elk hunting. And it's a good podcast. I like these podcasts where we talk a little bit of hunting, we talk gear, we talk, exercise, and then we talk about health, and we talk about mindset, and we talk about relationships. And I think Jordan is really on that realm of fostering relationships, and I think that's what I like about him.
Yeah, again, he's a very intelligent guy. He's got a lot to offer, and he's not a one-trick pony by any stretch. He knows food, he knows health, and he knows a lot of things, gut biome, and everything important. So
yeah, so watch for his foods to drop. Humble Foods, I think this fall they'll be coming out, hopefully right in time for hunting season, but we'll see.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, they're pretty good. I had one at work the other day.
Yeah, you did.
I took one to work, so I couldn't cook, and it was like eating stew that you made, fresh. It was so easy too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy this podcast, and again, you can always check it out on our YouTube, Stealthy Hunter. All right, so we are back again with Jordan Reisner from Humble Foods, and he's been gracious enough to host us in his home on a very snowy, kind of blizzardy Montana day in February. And if you didn't already catch the podcast about Humble Foods, the freeze-dried food company that he started, make sure to go do that because we just had bags of it. It's so good. So we have a separate podcast on that. But what me and Ryan really wanted to do was kind of just dig a little bit deeper into your history with, obviously we talked about in the podcast about why food is so important to you, maybe a little bit more of that and some health topics. And then we can talk a little bit about mental toughness and training and endurance activities like Spartan racing and stuff that you like to do, as well as backcountry bow hunting.
When I first had my first conversation with you, Jordan, I quickly realized that you're not just about eating healthy foods. You've got a lot of depth to you. We talked a little bit about, businesses that you'd been in the past. And I thought, I went home after that conversation. I was actually at a trailhead when I was talking to you. I went home and I told him, I was like, man, this guy, we got to get him on the podcast. He's got a lot of great advice and a lot of knowledge. So that's what we were hoping to get to talk to you about once we came over here. So yeah, pretty exciting for us to actually sit down with you and talk about what you've done.
Well, thank you. I'm humbled. Hopefully my head isn't too big. I can get back out of this room.
It's a pretty big room. I don't know. We're going to have to really work on that.
Let's talk about your history. Where you started, where you, I know you haven't been here in Montana for that long, 5-6 years or so.
Yeah.
But where you came from?
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest, in Michigan, and hunting was my biggest passion. So I'm a 4th generation bow hunter, and my great-great-grandfather was a Chippewa in Michigan. And so I imagine there's many generations that I just haven't been able to track, but it's in my heart, it's in my blood, it's part of my origin story. And so hunting whitetail with my bow and arrow was just the thing that I cared about most in life. Yeah. And I was always kind of a sick kid, and you kind of hear about people who fall into one of two buckets. Like they're either just a normal, healthy person and then something happens, like a trigger event in their life, like death of someone loved that they cared about, or a car accident or something just destroys their health. Or you have people who are just kind of like those sick kids. And that was me. I was just a sick kid, missing a lot of school and always struggling with something. And it got worse and worse and worse. And when I was in engineering college, where I met my best friend, Steve Wright, he's also my business partner in Humble Foods and our other many businesses together. When I met him, we were kind of bonded because we both had horrible digestive issues. And we were in a fraternity. And so we had like these community bathrooms, and we'd be in the stalls next to each other like, dude. And he'd be like, dude. I'm like, dude. Like, this is bad. And I was having diarrhea like 15 times a day. And it just kept getting worse. And the stress of college just really made it worse. And then I went through losing my mom from cancer. And that just sent me over a cliff with how sick I was. I was really low energy, couldn't get out of bed, malnourished. I weigh 180 pounds today in this moment as we're sitting here, and I was 115 pounds, just emaciated. Wow. And they couldn't figure it out. And they finally found that it was celiac disease, which for anyone listening who doesn't know is just an autoimmune disease where your body attacks your digestive tract when you eat gluten, which is such a weird thing, right? Like, why would our immune systems attack our own? It's just such a weird thing. Yeah. But they finally figured it out. Like, okay. And that, me being the engineer, I'm like, okay, now I can solve this problem. You're giving me the solution. I know what it is. And they said, yeah, if you just eat gluten-free, you'll be fine. And I tried that for 2 years, and I didn't get any better. I had no improvement in my symptoms. Yet I had cut out the thing that they said I needed to cut out to feel better. And at that time, I was already married, and I got married really young, and we started having kids, and we have a daughter and a son. And one night I remember writing my will, because I was like 22, and I had this newborn son, and I had no will. I'm 22 years old, but I needed a will because I was literally dying. And so I remember waiting up one night and just at the kitchen table, like handwriting my will out and being like, okay, here's the login to our bank account. Here's the insurance guy's phone number, like all these things for my wife, and just gave it to her in a notebook paper. And she's like, no, that's not okay. Like, you need to figure this out. And I just went down the rabbit hole and started reading and going into these obscure forums and just trying to understand what people had tried that worked. And I found this little obscure diet called the specific carbohydrate diet. And it's essentially paleo. It's a little bit more strict paleo. And so it's really just focused on eating healing, healthy, fatty cuts of meat, like chicken soups, broths, easy to digest fruits and vegetables, usually like well-cooked fruits and vegetables, and that kind of thing. And just switched my diet to that. And within 7 days, my diarrhea stopped. Huh? 7 days. Like, life-changing, right? Like, get the camera. This is not, what is this?
This is not diarrhea.
And yeah, this should be called the poop show today. So you'll lose your explicit rating.
Yeah,
some of our press shows
it's
are
one
talking
thing
about
everybody
that,
does. So
fair point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a life-changing experience to finally have that stop. My number one symptom. And then I started putting weight on, started feeling better. And from there, I've just had to rebuild my gut. And we can go into a lot more detail on what I need to do that. And there were many layers. It wasn't just food, but food was the catalyst. And I've been on a paleo type diet ever since. I've raised my kids paleo. And it fits right into our hunting lifestyles, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm already trying to go out and hunt and procure the cleanest, highest quality game meat that I can, and that we're able to on our public lands. Why not just have that be the staple of my diet and eat more of a hunter-gatherer type diet that's based on our ancestors? And that just clicked, and it just made so much sense to me. And then it made sense to me why my body genetically would love that and would thrive on it. Mm-hmm. And ever since then, I've just been on this mission to help other people with their digestive health. And Steve and I, he had IBS. He was diagnosed with IBS and just had horrible gas and cramping and constipation and diarrhea. And so he used the same foods and healed his gut. And we said, man, we have to help other people with this. And we had day jobs as engineers. We actually worked at General Motors in Michigan, and I was a mechanical engineer. He was an electrical engineer. Mm-hmm. And we started this little side business, a little website called SCD Lifestyle, and started helping people with digestive health. Just giving them diet tips, and started writing a book and just trying to help people who are going through the same struggles we were. Mm-hmm. And it grew and grew and grew. And now it's this huge community of people. There's like 300,000 people on our email list who are all like-minded folks just trying to, we call it be health engineers, just trying to re-engineer your health, to take ownership of it and to rebuild your gut. And it's been a beautiful 8-year journey of helping other people who have been through the same stuff that we had gone through and giving them a quicker path to relief mm-hmm. than we had. And that became our day jobs. In 2012, we were able to quit our engineering jobs and just do digestive health full time, wow. Which was just an incredible blessing, a dream come true, really. But hunting has always been the passion. Hunting's the thing I actually do when I'm not working or hanging out with my kids or my family. And it's always been a dream to live in Montana. Mm-hmm. The night my dad actually died, the last thing I talked to him about was elk hunting. And in Montana, it was like our big dream. And in Michigan, it's this mystical thing to come out west and hunt these giant beasts in the forest. And so I was fortunate to be able to move out here almost 6 years ago now and figure out elk hunting, which is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life. There's a video of me on, it's so embarrassing now that I look at it, but there's a video of me on Instagram. I do a lot of solo hunting, and I figured out a lot of elk hunting, solo hunting. And I shot my first bull by myself. And it took me 4 years. Locations. Nobody took me to their hunting spot. So I had to find it was all DIY on public land. So it took me 4 years to figure this all out. Yeah. Find a good spot, figure out how to call, which really long learning curve there. So not only finding them, but calling them and then shooting them solo with a bow and arrow. So I finally shoot this bull and there's no one there with me. And so I'm having this whole experience on my own, which is beautiful and spiritual in many ways. And I just cried. I cried for probably 6 hours straight, the whole pack out and then the whole drive home. And then I got home in my garage. It was 4 a.m. And I was like, I have to share this with somebody. So I turned the camera on. I'm just crying in front of the camera. It was so ridiculous. And I put it on Instagram. And then now that I look back at it, I'm like, oh, it's kind of embarrassing. Just crying after I shot my first bull. But it was this lifelong dream, right? Yeah. And I didn't have, $10K to go work with an outfitter. So it was just figuring it all out and having that all culminate in that one thing. Was powerful. And so I don't know, that kind of went on a side tangent there, but hunting's always been the core of what I wanted to do. And then helping people has just been a really beautiful turn of events in my life with their health anyway. Yeah. And I remember the first time I heard you on Gritty Bowman's podcast and you started talking about leaky gut, and I was just like, yes, someone's talking about leaky gut in the hunting space. I had never had my worlds collide before. My digestive health day job collided with my passion for hunting for the first time, and my mind exploded.
That's cool.
Leaky gut, a lot of poop talk on that one. It was like, oh wow.
It was perfect. This is amazing. So I instantly knew. And it's so funny. That was almost a year ago now that I listened to that. And it's cool that you're here in my house in Bozeman and we're hanging out and just laughing and having fun.
Yeah. I think health is really the foundation of your life. Whatever you love to do, whatever your passions are, whatever your job is, you live in your body. Mm-hmm. Right. And so your health is literally every second of your day and night, it affects you. Mm-hmm. And you can't really, if you have IBS or you have celiac, untreated celiac disease, going on a backcountry hunt, that's probably not a big possibility for you, with having low weight and low energy and, having to stop every 10 minutes or whatever. And so that affects, the things you would really love to do in your life. And what I've discovered is it's all intertwined. And that's what, I think, we've gotten a little slack. Some hunters will be like, oh, I don't want to hear about all this health stuff. I don't need that. But most people are so oh, finally somebody's helping me with this problem that I've had that I thought I would ignore it. And you mean I'm not the only person that has that symptom or that problem or whatever. And you just can't run away. Mm-hmm. You just can't run away from your body. You can't run away from how you feel. And a lot of people try to. And I think that may be part of the reason we have such a health crisis in our country is that we've maybe gotten disconnected from those signals, our instinctual signals that tell us something's wrong. But it's kind of fun. It's been fun to blend it a little bit because it's just part of life. You can't run away from that. Yeah.
And it seems like I would argue that the majority of adults in the United States specifically are not well. There is something going on in their body that they're not talking about. And it's not something that I got at first until this became my day job. And I would be at a cocktail party or maybe meeting someone's family for the first time or at a dinner party or something. And they're like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, I help people with digestive health. Basically, I talk to people about poop all day. And they're like, and then later on,
they're like, hey.
They grab me by the arm and they're like, hey, I've got this going on. What should I do? Or, hey. And then 5 minutes later, they walk away. 5 minutes later, somebody else from the dinner table comes up. Hey, what do you know about cramping after eating, and they're like whispering in your ear and you're like, everybody here's got issues,
It's so true. It's so true. And I've seen that because since we started talking about these things, we'll go to an event or a show or whatever. And for whatever reason, a lot of guys feel very comfortable talking to Hill about everything.
Well, it's the doctor thing. It kind of takes away the...
And it just almost seems like everybody that you come across, maybe they don't just come out and say it, but eventually they pull her aside and they start talking about it. And it's super interesting because it's just people that you would never think of.
It's everybody.
Everybody has issues.
Yeah. There's like a few professions, I think you have to decide whether or not you actually want to confess that you do it. Like if you're on an airplane. Do you really want to confess to the person next to you that you're a doctor? Because you may spend your entire flight diagnosing that person and having them talk to you about all their health conditions. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I've said, I'm a coffee barista. They're not going to talk to me about their health issues. If I say that I am, it usually ends up that way. And that's because of just human nature. And people, especially when they have health concerns, they want some answers. They want some help. And I hate to say it, but medicine today gives people no information. Mm-hmm. I typically experience on a weekly basis a new patient who comes in. They have labs. They bring out the slew of labs they've had run. And some are off, some are normal, they've never, ever, their physician has never explained to them why these labs were run, what they help, what they're telling you, why they did it, or if they're abnormal, why they're abnormal. They'll do something like, your thyroid's off, you need medication. Mm-hmm. That's it. And they don't, why do I need medication? Well, that we know there's lots of different types of thyroid problems. Like, what is my thyroid doing? One, physicians don't have time. Typical physician does not have time to go over that with you. I have patients who get their labs in the mail with a note that says, you have some abnormals. Please call to make an appointment. And most people don't ever call because they go, well, maybe I don't feel that bad, or they're scared. They immediately go, something's wrong with me, so I'll just put my head in the sand. And as physicians, we are doing a disservice to people because 95% of people don't understand biochemistry. And if I write on somebody's labs, this is abnormal, you should call me and make an appointment, probably more than half of those people are not going to call and make an appointment, right? I should be calling them saying, let me explain to you what I see here. And maybe this will help us make a decision on our next step. Mm-hmm. Most physicians are not doing that in the healthcare system. So people are completely confused sometimes as to even why they're on the medications they're on. They bring you a list of medications. Sometimes they literally do not know what these medications are for. And I think that's just a huge disservice. And it's one of the reasons I think why we see so many people reaching out for help. And it's more about knowledge. They want more knowledge about what is it that they can do. Most people don't really want me to just give them a drug and not tell them what's wrong with them. They actually want to know what's going on with them. Now, are they going to comply and actually do what I tell them to do, which is usually something like you can't eat gluten for the rest of your life. And by the way, we're going to have to take 4 years and heal your gut. Most people look at you like, are they going to comply and do that? They might not. But they want the knowledge of what that means. And I think that's where doctor is docere, which means teacher. My job is to teach you. Your job is to do the work. Whether or not you do it, if I haven't done my job well, if I haven't taught you why you need to do this. And then eventually, they will become the expert. Like you. You taught yourself. Let's say, for example, you had a great doctor who walked you through this and helped you, supported you, but you had to do all the work. They didn't do anything for you. And you figured this out on your own, and you figured out your diet. And now you're the expert that all these people come to. They don't go to the doctor for that. The doctor doesn't live with celiac. The doctor doesn't understand that. But it's my job as the doctor to point out to you why it's so vitally important that you shouldn't eat gluten and what are some steps that could help you, right? And then you're going to go become the expert. And that's what I would really like to see everybody become with their healthcare. Like, you should be the own expert of your body. You shouldn't have to be going to somebody else all the time for them to explain to you what your problem is. That's kind of how I think about medicine. And that's where we screw up in this country.
Oh,
We just don't teach enough. We don't teach enough. And then you have the problem of Google. So you got Google diagnosis. So now everybody has access to so much information, like online programs and like what you guys are offering. So you can go find these things. But a lot of people, again, they'd rather stick their head in the sand because they start reading about all this stuff and they're just like it's like information overload now. Where it used to be our grandparents, they go to the doctor would be like, yep, take this medication. They'd be like, okay, thanks. They never even ask a question. They didn't know why. But they didn't have access to all this information. So they didn't have analysis paralysis. They just like took the medication and went on with their life, right? So I think I don't even know how I got on this tangent, but I think that's so many people are suffering. So many people are suffering in silence, and they're looking for people to teach them. And it doesn't have to be a doctor. It can be somebody people who have actually experienced things are the best teachers. I don't know everything, and I didn't live with celiac disease. If a patient comes to me, I cannot sympathize with having celiac disease. But I could say, hey, I know this guy that's lived through this. He has this amazing program. I can send them your way. They're going to get so much more benefit than me as a physician sitting there. But I'm a teacher. I should help them like find those resources and go do that. So anyways, there's my tangent for the podcast.
That was a good tangent.
I loved it. I'm a Kool-Aid drinker.
Well, healthcare is complex. The body is like the most intricate, crazy machine ever invented. You can't even begin to create. You're an engineer. Like, can you even create anything? Maybe they are like robots now, or I don't know, these scary things. But I don't even think you can begin to imagine all the complex processes that are happening every single second of your entire life to keep you just sitting here with your eyes open and talking and your digestive system working and your nervous system functioning. And like, it's crazy,
Oh, it's like one of my mentors always said, whenever you take medications without asking questions, it's the riskiest thing that you could ever do, because a medication is designed for one of its effects. There's no such thing as side effects. There's effects. And there's one of the effects that you're actually looking for it to give you. There's a whole lot of other effects that we have no clue what's happening inside of our body. And it's weird when they make drugs too, because they'll do these trials, and you've read them. They'll do these trials and they're just the most obscure things will happen. And they'll take a drug for their eyes and something weird happens to their left toenail or something. And you're like, this is the weirdest thing.
That's the example that everything's connected. And this is another problem with, I'm a naturopathic doctor, okay, folks? I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not a specialist. So the medical doctors tend to have to get out, and if they go into primary care, which is rare anymore, because a primary care physician, which is what most naturopaths are, we're trained as primary care providers. You kind of need to know everything. Which nobody wants to have to know everything. Those are the doctors you go to and you're like, I got a sniffle, I got an earache, I got a headache, I got a stomach ache. And they're the ones that have to like somehow figure out either where to send you or how to help you. So that's a really big job. And as naturopaths, we're trained as primary care physicians. You can go into specialties, but if you know of your specialties, like you have your internal medicine person, you have your neurologist, you have your cardiologist, you have like all these specialties. It's like they know one thing about that one area. And so that's how medicine is treating patients these days. So if you have knee pain and you're having heart arrhythmia and you're having brain fog, they're going to send you to a neurologist, they're going to send you a cardiologist, and they're going to send you to an orthopedic or a physiatrist. But you know what? You could be having knee pain and brain fog and arrhythmias because you have celiac disease. Does that make sense, right? So it's all connected. You can't just take a system that's electrically hooked up together. All the plumbing is hooked up together. It's all one system. The connective tissue, it's like the scaffolding in the walls and the sheetrock. It's like all interlaced with all these things. You can't just treat one thing. Now, if I just punch a hole in that sheetrock, well, I can fix that. You could patch that up. Maybe you break your leg, right? You snap your humerus skiing up at Big Sky, right? You get your leg fixed. You get it put back together. But these internal things that are slow to come on and they start getting worse and worse than the whole body, to give a medication for like one symptom, there's absolutely no way you can't affect other systems, because there's not just one system being affected with that illness or whatever. It's like all connected. And that sounds super woo-woo. I know, like people are like, woo-woo, woo-woo. It's not woo-woo.
No.
If you're an engineer, you know this, right? You know when you build a house, it's all connected, right? And it's like a mouse could be up in your attic chewing on your electrical wires, and then at some point you're going to lose all the electricity in your entire house, right? You got to go find where that little thing is that's screwing up the entire house, right? And the worst part about medicine is that that's really hard to do. Sometimes that's really hard to do, right? And it's trying to like find the key that fits, and there's 1,000 keys that you got to go through, right? It's so expensive, so time consuming. The patient's getting sicker. It can be really, really frustrating. And so when I say you can't just treat one system and expect, or take one medication and expect it's not going to affect everything, it is. Because like celiac affects everything, right? And you could just say, oh, it's an autoimmune condition where my gut, it should just be my gut. Well, as you well know, your gut is a mess. Your whole body is a mess, right?
So maybe we should get a little more specific as to digestive health, because that's why I'm sitting here. I want to learn a little more about digestive health. It's so important.
So
and I know
you're the expert now. You talk
Jordan
to us
is
about
the
it.
expert. He's got some digestive enzymes going on right there. I want to hear about why it's so important and some of the effects it can have if you got poor digestive health.
Yeah. Well, to your point that we were just talking about, Hillary, it's like if I have an accidental gunshot wound to my leg, or if I'm slept on some shale and I fall and shatter my femur in the backcountry, I'm super grateful for Western medicine.
Exactly.
Super grateful for emergency medicine. Rock on, guys. Right. But if I have a chronic illness like celiac disease, or if I just want to focus on preventative medicine and just being the healthiest person that I can be, so I can hunt 7 days in the backcountry and put on 80 miles and do that 4 times in a season, or go on my dream, sheep hunt in Alaska or something like that. I think digestive health is the first place to start. And when I'm going to put an engineering lens on things, like if I put on my engineering glasses and I look at the body is like a system of inputs and outputs, just like a car. In our car, we put gasoline in it, and it outputs energy to the wheels, and it takes us places and goes fast and gets us out of muddy ruts or whatever, keeps us safe in the snow, and does all these things. There's outputs. And our body has outputs as well. And outputs tell us all the information we need to be able to change the inputs and make things better. And so your energy levels, your poop, your gas, like all these things are outputs on a daily basis that are telling you things. We call them subtle clues. They're these subtle clues that if you start to pay attention to them and listen to them, they're telling you things. Like maybe you shouldn't have eaten what you ate last night for dinner if you have diarrhea the next morning. And you start to think about it and you're like, actually, every time I go to that restaurant, I have diarrhea the next morning. And then it's like, what do you think it was? Well, whenever I go there, I always get, I don't know, maybe it's a raw seafood joint or something. Like, maybe you're having problems with shellfish. I don't know. It could be anything. But my point is just trying to get people to listen to their bodies more. And the digestive system is usually the loudest, right? So if we're having bad gas, we're hearing about it from our spouse. If we're having really bad constipation, that's extremely uncomfortable. If we're having to run to the bathroom a couple of times a day, that's a little weird. And it's the loudest symptom. It's the easiest way to listen to your body. And so for me, I think digestive health is, and there's a lot of people, Hippocrates said all disease begins in the gut 2,000 years ago or whatever it was. And so there's some truth to that. There's some truth that all disease begins in the gut. And I believe strongly that if we take good care of our guts, a lot of well-being comes out of that. We can be better mountain athletes. We can be better parents. We can be better at our jobs. We'll feel better, and our energy will be better. And the first place to start, in my opinion, is just eating. eating the right foods. And I do believe that everybody has a custom version of a diet that's going to work best for them. I believe all of our genetics are unique. Our epigenetics are unique. The life experiences we've had that kind of flipped on and off those epigenetics are unique. And I do believe everyone has that kind of responsibility to figure out what diet works best for them. I do feel personally strongly that a paleo type diet is what I've seen to be the lowest inflammation base to start with. And why is that? Well, you're pulling out a lot of the inflammatory foods. You're pulling out really inflammatory grains. You're pulling out table sugar. You're pulling out all those things that are making you have the chronic knee pain. They're giving you the constipation. They're making you have cramps and gas. Can paleo stuff give you gas? Certainly, if you eat 3 cups of broccoli, probably going to fart a lot, right? But in general, I think that that's a good base. It's a good base to start with. And in the hunting space, in the hunt, harvest, health community, that's a very easy sort of lifestyle to align with, right? I mean, we're already trying to live more of a hunter-gatherer lifestyle anyway. Why not eat the way they did before we had agriculture?
Right.
It only makes sense to me. And once I did that, once I went from the standard American diet, which was like what I grew up on, cereal, lasagna, we had like the same 5 things for dinner every week, like lasagna, cheeseburgers, like pizza, meatloaf with like cornbread. We had the same thing my whole life growing up, and it's a standard American diet. And then in 7 days when I switched, my body started to finally heal. Like it just was like that key in the lock that you were talking about. And I think if anyone's listening to this right now and they're struggling with any type of digestive issues, the cool thing is that you can kind of think like an engineer. And engineers do testing and tweaking all the time. So we just have this mindset of testing. Like, what happens if I try this? What happens if I try this? And we have to look at the data to find out if it's the result we wanted or not. And the cool thing about the body is you can try a paleo type diet for 7 days and look at your outputs. Like, am I having less diarrhea? In my case, it stopped in 7 days. Or is your constipation better? Or are you having less gas? Or is your skin starting to clear up? Is your right knee pain that's been hurting you since you were 18 and you played high school baseball and you were a catcher and they told you one day you're just going to have to get it scoped. And then after you've been on a paleo type diet for a few weeks, the inflammation in your knee is gone and your pain's gone for the first time, and that little gait that you have is finally over with. I mean, that's a true story from what I've seen, and they're all really obscure stories. I'll get people that'll email me and tell me that, like, the tinnitus, the ringing in their ears from 25 years ago when they were in Vietnam or something, or however long ago it would have been for them that they were in the military in active service. And all of a sudden they blamed this tinnitus on that, and then all of a sudden it's gone. They don't have that ringing in there. It's the weirdest things that shift in our bodies when we pull out all the inflammatory foods. We lower the inflammation in our bodies. We lower the sugar load in our bodies. And it's pretty wild. But I would encourage anyone listening, you have these symptoms, and they're really cool because they're giving you feedback. And you have the opportunity to test something new for a period of time and then see how those outputs change. And you get instant feedback, instant test results. Like, okay, a little bit better. I like this. What else can I try? And you just keep trying things and seeing what works for you.
Yeah.
So I'm not dogmatic and like, oh, this is the solution. You have to follow my Jordan diet because I have been gifted with it, and you should all eat my Jordan diet or something. Like, I don't know what it's going to be for you. It's the Ryan diet. It's the Hillary diet. Like, you have to figure it out through testing and what your body responds to, in my opinion.
Well, you don't really learn anyways if you don't experiment that way. I do have people that you've had people say this to you. Well, I could never do that. I could never quit eating gluten. Oh, I could never do that. And I'm like, well, you obviously then haven't had enough impetus to quit, meaning something is not bothering you quite enough yet to where you feel that you can do it. But the truth is, if you just try it and it does nothing, then we can try something else, right? Like you're hopefully, let's say if you have a normal, you're hopefully going to live another 50 years. So let's try this for a month, right? Like out of your whole 50 years. And if nothing changes, let's try something else. We have the option to do that here, right? And people just have such an emotional connection to their food. I think that's the other aspect here that we don't always address enough in people, is how much satisfaction and love food brings them in their life. And when you talk about cutting, especially comfort foods out, like telling somebody they can't even have their bread anymore, you're just like, ugh, but my bread is like my comfort. I need that bread at night. I just can't live without it. And it's like, well, then let's try to find you something else that's comforting. Maybe it's even just getting them on an exercise program, right? Because that will maybe replace that serotonin fix that they're getting from their bread, right? But I'm always like, let's just try it for a little bit. You can do anything for 7 days. Mm-hmm. Let's do it. And most of the time, something will change if they do it right, if they actually do it. But most of the time, things can change pretty quick. You know, like you with the SCD diet, like 7 days. That's pretty quick.
Yeah, I think it's super important. Kind of, going on what you were saying about paying attention basically to your body and what it's telling you. I can relate to that because I've talked about this many times, but my diet when I was in the backcountry, which is when we need it the most, didn't used to be the best. And every year as my hunt, the number of days that I hunted went up. The end of the season, I wouldn't recover very fast. And then it was like my joints were hurting. I was hobbling around for a month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks after all those hunts throughout the year. It just caught up to me, and all the inflammation finally just crushed me. And I was hobbled for a while after an entire hunting season. So with the help of Hill, and cleaning up my diet while I was back there, for me, it was cutting out the sugars. Which was a comfort food, and it's a comfort food for a lot of us that go, it's like, how many Snicker bars could I slip into every little pocket of my pack after it's all full? So you'd have just junk carbs, junk sugars, and what I found and what I was taught was the inflammation factor on that was huge. And over time, eating those kind of foods, it caught up to me, and it was just starting to be like, man, it's a 6-week recovery at the end of the season. And so immediately once I stopped eating those things in the backcountry, and I changed my diet by doing, making my own foods and jacking up my healthy fats and cutting out the inflammatory sugars, it was night and day. And it was like, holy smokes. And this is something that is so important to me. I don't want to be hobbled at the end of the year. In fact, I want to add 2, 3, 4. How many weeks can I add at the end of a hunting season?
How many can you add?
January.
Obviously, you can have.
I don't want it to be over in November. And it was just one of those things that was like, yep. Immediate fix for me. And now, at the end of a hunt season, at the end of a long hunt, I feel as good as I did at the day one, and I'm not all broken down and hobbled at the end of it. And it was just that simple change in my diet that made it all better. So
yeah, food is so important. So you've been on this program now. How long have you been on the paleo-ish?
10 years.
10 years. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I haven't had a drop of gluten or table sugar or grains in 10 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that makes it hard to eat out and stuff, doesn't it?
Not necessarily. It depends on where you go, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I went to an Italian joint, I'd probably have a problem. But
he just carries Humble Foods with him everywhere
that's right.
he goes.
Humble Foods.
He's got a big backpack.
No, I mean, anywhere I go, I can order. Maybe we should talk about what a paleo type diet is, right?
Yeah.
It's healthy fattier cuts of meat. It's healthy fats like avocados and coconut oil and olive oil and then meats. Well, I said that fruits and vegetables, right? And then nuts and nut flours and things like that. And so if I go to a restaurant, I can order steak and potatoes and a side of whatever seasonal vegetables they have, and it's usually going to be really amazing, spinach and carrots or asparagus or something, and drizzled in olive oil and garlic, and it's usually amazing, right? And so I think a lot of people get hung up on where do you get carbs from, and especially during the backcountry. I need more carbs when I'm in the backcountry for 7 days, and as long as, in my opinion, as long as you're sourcing those from clean sources, you're going to feel great. And so that's like sweet potatoes and those like starchy tubers. And then, some fruits.
Some fruits,
Although,
yeah.
for me, if I have way too much fruit, like if I try to do all my carbs from fruit, I just fart a lot and it feels terrible.
And one of my meals is I dehydrate apples and pears. I love pears. So I get some of my carbs in the mountains from that. And every day I'll have my one little dehydrated bag of pears. And that's where I get my carbs from, up there. And it's awesome. And it's delicious.
It is pretty good.
Yeah. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I think that the specialized diets, with the carbohydrates, I think traditionally most people think of carbohydrate as grains, right? So where am I going to get my carbohydrates? I'm not eating breads or pastas or rice or whatever grains are that they're eating. And truthfully, you don't really need grains because you can get enough complex carbohydrate from vegetables and root vegetables, tubers, and yeah, I think that's part of the food movement. Like the processed food movement has made everybody believe that you need to get your carbohydrates from grains. I mean, come on, look at the food pyramid. Grains are the big, right? Yeah. They're the biggest. Or I don't even know if they use that food pyramid anymore. It needs to be turned over. Fat needs to be here, and
they flipped it over.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it needs to be. And so it's like, but most people think of grains like cereals, breads, all that kind of stuff. And so that's where people get caught up on like, well, what carbohydrates am I going to eat? And it's like, there's a lot of carbohydrates in vegetables, and you do get a little bit of carbohydrate out of everything that you eat, right? So, yeah, it's interesting. So let's talk a little bit. Now we've talked about gut health. Let's talk a little bit about mental toughness. I see you're a Spartan racer.
Yeah,
and
I've
never
surrounded
been.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many races you've done, but it looks like a lot of races. So
Ryan did one Spartan race that I was witness to, and it was the scariest looking thing I think I've ever been to. Crawling up this hill under barbed wire with like thousands of other dudes and chicks rolling around in the mud, sliding down hills, barbed wire, people getting stuck. And then after that, you had to launch yourself off a water slide thing that would literally break your back and explode anything you had on your body off of you into a huge, muddy, bloody, I can only guess what was in that puddle of water. And I'm thinking to myself,
a lot of sunglasses and GoPros in that.
Yeah. People's things just flying off their heads, their sunglasses, and they'd be like, get out, dude, you lost it. Sorry, And that was like, it was just amazing to watch thousands of people doing this like really intense stuff. And he did really well, but
it was one of the funner days and of just like competition, endurance challenges, races. It was a great community, great thing to be a part of, and it was just a blast. So how have you gotten into Spartan racing, and how many of these things do you do? Because we're sitting in this room and you've got like a ton of equipment. You've got, an incline machine here that's obviously all jacked up at a pretty good angle and everything to stay in pretty good shape. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, this is my favorite room. I call it my gear room, but it's more like my gym gear room. It's got all my hunting gear. It's got my bows and arrows, and I can shoot out to 17 yards in here, but then I also train in here. So there's a lot of rings, a lot of sandbags, platforms to do step ups. I got an incline treadmill. I've got a high altitude oxygen simulation machine called a LiveO2 adaptive contrast machine. And
can you explain that just a little bit? You were telling me about it.
It's really cool. So LiveO2 is a company that started to try to bring the technology that's been studied a lot around hyperbaric chambers, which Hillary, I'm sure you know a lot about.
Yeah, lots of good stuff.
And the cool things it can do for your brain and your heart and everything else, your immune system. And they've tried to figure out how to build a system that could potentially bring that technology to homes at a cheaper price. And I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just bought it, and I love it. But essentially, you turn the machine on and walk away for an hour, and it fills up the bag with, and I might butcher this, but part of the bag's full of oxygen-rich air, and then part of the bag's full of oxygen-depleted air. And then you start a workout. So I have the X9i treadmill from Nordic Track, and it's just incline treadmill. It goes up to 40% incline. And so I usually throw my pack on with like 40 to 50 pounds in it and just start hiking fast. and with the mask on, and you start with the oxygen-rich air, and it just really oxygenates your body, it oxygenates your muscles, and then I can flip a switch and go to the other bag, and that depletes all my oxygen. It simulates 15,000 feet.
Right.
And it's not like one of those masks, just to be clear, where you're making it hard to breathe. Those have been proven to not work at all. This is actual oxygen depleted air that's going in my body through this mask, because there's a bag of it next to me, like a 7-foot tall bag full of this stuff next to me. And so it's the level of oxygen you'd experience at 15,000 feet of elevation. And so I can do workouts, simulate like I'm up on a ridge in Colorado, even though I'm in Montana, which is nice because our ridges are like 9,000 feet. So, exactly. But it's fun. I mean, for me, so hunting elk in the mountains in the backcountry was a dream, and when I was sick with celiac disease, there were doctors that told me that I would never be able to do stuff like that, and that I needed to get acclimated to living with this disease and understand that I was always going to be malnourished and not be able to do stuff like that.
No Spartan races in your future.
And I'll be honest, when I first came out here and started to hunt in the backcountry, I was scared to death because those doctors had planted little seeds of fear in my head, and they just ate at me. And I believed them. Right? Like, we're taught to believe doctors.
Yeah.
And I believed them. And I believed them that I was a sick guy still. And I believed them that I shouldn't go over that next ridge. I've already done too much today. I heard a bugle, I shouldn't go over that ridge or whatever.
So they were telling you to not push yourself.
Yeah. And so I didn't. And I had never done that as a kid. Like, I had never been in football. I played baseball and I actually worked a lot. So I never had that experience of like my football coaches pushing me beyond what I thought I was capable of. And I never had that kind of fostered experience. So I got to a point when I started hunting elk in the Rockies, especially because I hunt solo a lot. I got to the point where I realized, like, I am actually very mentally weak. And it's because of a lot of things. But now I have the choice to choose something different and foster it. And so I started studying mental toughness. And fortunately, I got to meet and become really good friends with Dustin Diefendorfer, and he has a company here in town called Mountain Tough Fitness Labs. And they specialize in mental toughness. They want to be the best in the world at mental toughness. And so their team is like Dustin, who's just one of the most incredible backcountry hunters I've ever met. And then he's got an Army Ranger who taught for 30 years. And he's got Navy SEALs. And he's got police and fire and special forces. And they're all here to like help everybody foster more mental toughness. And I started to understand that it's something that you foster, that you build. And it's like a muscle where you just need reference points. And the more reference points I thought that I could collect, the more confidence I would have in myself. And also safe and security, knowing that I could push myself a little bit further and I'd be safe and I'd be just fine. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't die, right? And, there's a lot of threads that go along that. Like, there's this idea that David Goggins talks a lot about, who's a phenomenal just special forces guy. He talks about this pushing past 40%. And that moment when your mind starts to panic and say, this is too much, that usually means you're only at 40%. Like, that's when that safety mechanism kicks in. But your body could still go 60% further before you'd probably die, right? And so he always talks about, like, you got to push past 40%. So when that comes up, instead of going, oh, I need to scale back, you go, oh, I'm at 40%. Hi, 40%. I'm okay. I'm going to go up to 60 or 70 today. And so Spartan races come in because I think they're a really powerful way to collect reference points of mental toughness for me and my own personal growth. Because I knew that for me to become a better elk hunter, for me to become better and more proficient in the backcountry and safer, that I needed to trust my body in a way that I've never trusted my body before. I needed those reference points to help me trust my body. And mental toughness is how I wanted to develop that trust. Right. And Spartan races are a really, really mentally challenging event. And I don't ever compete in them to win because I'm just not built like that. I'm probably never going to win a Spartan race. I'm just trying to beat my previous time. And so I've done a lot of Spartan races in every different elevation, every different climate. I've done them in the pouring rain in Snohomish,
Done them out in our neck of the woods,
Yep.
the town I grew up in. Yeah.
In the fog, in the rain, in the mud. And the river was flooded and you're doing half the race, chest high water. I've done them in the middle of August in Eden, Utah at 8,000 feet where people were falling over next to me from heat stroke. I mean, I've just put myself in those positions because Spartan races take me to 40% really quickly. And then I have to choose if I'm going to push past it and then play in that zone and be comfortable, because every Spartan race that I've done has tested me. Last year I did in Montana, there's a sprint and a beast. So you can do 13-mile race and then you can do a 5-mile race the next day. And I thought, that's impossible. And so I signed up for it. And I did a 13-mile race the first day, and it pushed me in its own way, physically, mentally. I usually end up in tears after I cross the finish line of these things because they push me beyond anything I've ever done before. But to get up the next day after that 13-mile race and do another 5-mile race, I thought was the hardest thing I'd ever do. But then I thought, I've done that in the backcountry. I've done 13 miles in the backcountry, slept for 5 hours and gotten up and chased bulls again the next morning.
Right.
Like, how is this any different? And it's all like this context is just different. So I get up the next day. The beast was a beautiful day. It was sunny. It was about 50 degrees, perfect temperature, not too hot, not too cold. Pushed myself really hard. I had my best time I've ever done. Get up the next day, could hardly walk. Okay, how am I going to do this 5-mile race? We get there, storm comes in. It's May in Montana. So it starts raining. All of a sudden, temperature drops to about 34 degrees. And it's pouring rain. And I'm undergeared, which I don't like being undergeared. I'm obsessive about my gear. I have the wrong gear on. I have the wrong clothes on. It's pouring rain. And so I ended up doing that race in the pouring rain. And every Spartan race, it has a secret obstacle, right? Like in Snohomish, it was the river flooding.
Okay.
And all the trails were like chest-high water. This race had this cold rain, and we were all battling hypothermia out there. And some of those races just take you, because I had done 13 miles before, I didn't have it in me to run very fast. So I was like, it took me 5 hours to finish that race. And we were all battling this pouring down rain, hypothermia, all blue lips. And every race I find has a secret obstacle that just, I think I'm prepared. I think I'm good. I'm like, oh, I've done many of these before. I'm fine. And it comes in and it sneaks in and it challenges me. And I would say that Spartan races have been the best training that I've ever done for backcountry hunting.
Right.
In that way.
Wow. Yeah. We've talked about train to hunt a lot.
Mm-hmm,
and that's kind of something that we've done to kind of test yourself and push past the pain in a way and do, set yourself up for things that are going to be super difficult throughout the entire year. So when the hunting season comes around, you look back on those experiences and you say to yourself, well, I've done that before. I've done this long hike and I've gotten up the next day and gone through it again and gone through that 7, 8, 9 days in a row. And what's funny is the mental toughness thing is everybody knows it's important. And everybody's trying to figure out a way to get past that, like Gogan says, the 40%. And one of the things that's helped me is just trying to trick my mind. And I try to come up with this analogy, like, you got like a long drive ahead of you. You got those guys that hunt a lot. It's like I got a 17-hour drive to the eastern Montana. What's 17 hours? It's going to be a long, long way. So when I hop in the truck, I start driving. 6 hours goes by lickety split. It's like it just went by super fast. But if I would have told myself I've got a 6-hour drive, that would have not have gone very fast. It would have felt like forever. So I would have gotten to probably the 2-hour mark, and then it felt like I would have been sitting in that car forever. And it's just a mind game. You notice that, and I drive a lot, so I try to play those little games in my head. And every day in the backcountry, or prior to the trip, even going into it, I'll find myself just imagining the worst hunt ever. This is going to be the hardest hunt ever. I'm going to have to cover more miles than I ever have. It's probably going to be a year where there's not a lot of animals. Just telling yourself and fooling myself that it's going to be brutal. And so usually it never is as hard as you thought it was going to be. And so I play those kind of games all the time with myself. And it's worked for me for whatever reason. Just assuming the worst, and it's usually not going to be the worst. And that gets me through hunting in Washington, especially. Bad weather is just common. And it's no different than Montana, where we're at right now. Typically, if you're a backcountry guy, you just experience bad weather. And a lot of guys can't deal with it. A lot of guys keeps them, pinned down to their base camp, and they don't go out in that bad weather, or it forces them to pack up and get off the hill. And if you're competitive and you want to be successful year after year, you can't do that. You just have to grind it out. You have to get through it and deal with it. So, that mindset of just going into anything, whether it's a race or a hunt or anything, just assuming it's going to be the worst. I think that's been huge for me. That's one of my tricks that I've used to get through these things that are hard. We putting these big trips on the map, on the calendar every year. We got that death hike this year. It's 100 miles. I'm going to go into that thinking, dude, this is going to suck. This is going to probably take me twice as many days as it should. And I think that will get me through it, way quicker than the other. So
Ryan is always, but he's always, I don't know what it is. I think maybe it's part of his superpower. He's pretty calm most of the time.
I wish I had a superpower.
He doesn't really get worked up very easily. He's pretty consistent. Like emotionally, he's super consistent.
Boring and even keel. That's how I like to say it.
But I think that serves him really well with mental toughness, because he's not really overly emotional. He's not really over analyzing everything. He's always kind of been like, well, that's just how it is. Like, in almost everything. Like if there's something going on in our life, or if there's even financially, or all the things you have in life besides backcountry hunting, he's always kind of consistent. He doesn't really get overly stressed, visibly anyways, like I do. I'm pretty much like, so for me, my mental toughness is like, I feel like I've done some tough things in my life, I feel like just school alone is like a grind, but doing some of the things he does, like I haven't trained myself how to be mentally tough as well as he has, but I also think it's part of my personality to be more like this, up and down, which is a challenge when you have to do those things, because it's easy for you to have a high and then a low and be like, I'm out of here, right? I think it helps that he's fairly like, this is just how it is. This is just life. Let's just do this. You can do this. He's like a good pep talker, because he just kind of keeps that consistency. You've always been like that. I've seen him do some crazy stuff, and he does this like,
well, I think a lot
of to me, I'm like, you did that. And he's like, yeah, I did. Well,
a lot of us know like how you feel at the end of a Spartan race. Something that's been really hard, where you push beyond that 40%. You went 70%, and you did it 2 days in a row. You know what that feeling is like at the end of it, right? When it's totally done. You get to sit back and think about what you just did. That is addicting. For me, that's like an adrenaline rush at the end. When it's all over, that's when I'm the most emotional, most excited about what I just did.
Yeah.
Not during it, but the feeling at the end. And I've talked about that like on a hunt as well. My favorite time over the entire trip is going to be just throwing my backpack in my truck, slamming the tailgate, and sitting in and driving home. Because now I've got those endorphins where I knew I just accomplished something fantastic. And that's my drug. Something about that feels perfect for me. And I look forward to that. So.
I love that. And that 100-mile hike sounds amazing. I got to hear more about that. I feel like, it's interesting what you said earlier. I think when I train all year with Dustin and do these Spartan races, my goal is exactly what you said earlier, which is what happened at the end of last year. I was done with the hunting season, had some gnarly hunts, had some bad weather, had was blessed with some luck and was able to have some pack outs.
Yeah.
And I got done with the season and I said, none of my days of hunting were harder than the workouts that I did. And I was like, wow, okay. That was the achievement of the goal.
Yeah.
Like I work out in a way in which it makes hunting feel a little bit less hard, so that's not the hardest thing that I do in the year. And you summed it up perfectly. I mean, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And there's just for me, that creates some sort of like security or safety that I'm going to be okay. I'm probably not going to die. Yeah. And I can hunt a little harder, you know?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's just what I'm trying to do.
For sure. Yeah. It's a good feeling knowing that you have that in the tank. And the only way you're going to find out is if you go do it and put yourself into doing difficult things like these Spartans. I mean, it's impressive. I don't know how many you've done, but I'm looking around. Are these all yours?
Oh, no. Well, some of them are my girlfriend's too.
Holy smokes.
We do them together.
That's a lot of Spartans. It's a lot of races. They're not all Spartans, but it looks like you put a lot of things on the calendar to test yourself every year. So, no, that's pretty cool. I like that. I think that's one of the most important things that I try to stress to younger guys is mental toughness comes from doing hard things in the off season. There's no easy way around that. You put yourself into difficult situations, you get through it. Over time, you realize it wasn't that difficult. You've done it before. It's going to be easier the next time through. And, it's really hard to teach young guys that because they kind of have to live through it to figure it out on their own. You can just kind of feed them that and hopefully they figure it out. But definitely, I don't think it's any secret now that mental toughness is probably the number one piece of the puzzle for us backcountry guys when it comes to, finding success on extended hunts, whether it's a week or 2 weeks. You got to have it. And especially out west.
I think that to your point, too, Hillary, there's areas of our lives where we're individually stronger or more mentally tough than others. So, in the health world, right? If Ryan, God forbid, came down with some condition, there might be a lot of wives who would fall apart. But you might have 50 reference points of patients that you've successfully treated with whatever the condition is. So you can turn around and be like, babe, I got this. Like, here's exactly what we need to do. And you're like calm and cool and collected, and you have the strength, and you're like the rock, and you're like, oh yeah, we're going to be all right,
Yeah.
Or that for me, that's business. Like business is my realm.
Yeah.
Like I have a lot of reference points. I'm mentally tough. If things get hard in business, I'm like, I got this. Let's do this, But my weakest area in life was my body from what I went through with my health. And so that was my weakest area mentally. And so that's why I've had to put a lot of time and attention and energy into sort of trying to improve that. But I think we all, everyone listening to this is going to have a few areas of their life where they're extremely mentally tough.
Believe it or not, I actually read a book as of late.
Yeah.
Do you believe me?
I don't, but I saw you do it.
No, I read a book, Travis Macy. I don't know if you know who Travis Macy is. So he's an ultramarathon guy.
Yeah.
Guy's incredible. He does all these insane challenges, and he's really, really good at it. Endurance for days. And his book was called Mindset. And
The Ultra Mindset.
So what I ended up getting out of that book was just real simple. You can kind of treat everything you do as a challenge. You can build your mental toughness with any and everything you do if you push it. That could be, like I mentioned, a long drive, a long extended drive. Challenging yourself while you're driving. All these little things that, a 10-hour drive, that's just you getting into your mind and telling yourself, I can do this. I got this, and do it. And once it's done, you feel good. And he goes into this with every little aspect in life that you can challenge yourself. And the outcome of that is you're going to be mentally tougher, whether that's with, it doesn't have to be just a backcountry hunt. It could be with everything, mothering, having children, everything. Treating every little thing, trying to test yourself in every simple way. And over time, it builds up a mental toughness. And I really enjoyed that book. It was super fascinating to hear how he's gotten to where he is and how he's able to overcome all these giant obstacles. And the guy's incredible in what he does in these long races. I can't even name all the races that he's won. But having that mindset of being aware of the test and telling yourself this is just a test, so get through it. I got a lot out of that book. I really enjoyed it.
It really translated into what we talked about before, though, with healthcare. You can't make these big changes without mental fortitude. Because what stops most people from finishing? They just can't, mentally, they just don't feel like they can do it. Maybe they'll blame it on something else, but you have to push yourself to cut that stuff out of your diet, to change your diet, to go in your kitchen and just clean out all that stuff. It takes a lot of will power, a lot of mental toughness, and to stay with something. But then as you do it long enough, it's no longer like, it's not like it was so tough. Now it's like easy, right? So then you push yourself that next level. But yeah, I think that we've kind of gotten soft in our society these days a little bit. So we've made it harder even for children to know like what that is to build that mental toughness, right? Like everybody wins, not just you, like everybody. And same thing with adults, it can be hard, especially for the personalities that need the challenge to get better, right? Like they need that challenge to progress in their life.
So what are some of the things that you tell yourself when you're in a Spartan race to get beyond that 40%? Is there anything specific, or is it just buckling down?
Well, I'm no 100-mile racer. Spartan races are like 10% of what some of these endurance events are. So,
but they're difficult, and like you've done the beast. Is that the 13?
It's like 13, 15 miles.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I have to reassure myself that I'm safe and that I'm going to be okay, because I have that loop that I'm the sick kid who shouldn't be pushing myself like this, or I will get sick and die. Like that's the loop in my head.
Right.
And I think it's going to be different for everybody. But for me, I just have to keep telling myself, like, when that big fear comes up, and usually it's if I'm pushing my running portions. The strength stuff at the Spartan race is easier for me. It's the endurance running, the trail running, that's hard for me, especially at elevation. And so it's usually pushing myself during those running portions, and I'm just not able to breathe very well. I'm starting to hit max heart rate, and I can feel my max heart rate happen, and I'm like, okay, I'm at 180, I can feel it. And that fear kicks in, that panic. You're not okay, you're going to die. You're not okay, you're going to die. And I just tell myself I'm going to be okay. This is 40% saying hi. And I know that I could actually probably run at max heart rate for another 6 hours and probably not die.
Right.
I'm going to be fine. And I tell myself I've done harder hunts than this before, although it's usually not true. Just to get through it. And, for me, that 40% mantra is really powerful, what David talks about. I think the things that he's done have been, it's amazing to read the amount of pull-ups he's done in 24 hours and push-ups in 24 hours. He's broken records. He's the only guy that's ever been to every special forces school and graduated that I'm aware of. And so it's been powerful to just think about that 40% mantra.
Yeah, it is a good mantra to have in your head. Mm-hmm. I could see that being very useful, telling yourself that. I think he was just on Rogan, wasn't he?
I think he was again, yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I got to see him speak here in Bozeman. Marcus Luttrell came through with their Patriot Tour a few years ago with Taya Kyle and Chris Kyle's wife, and it was a powerful speaking tour.
Yeah.
And so just the idea that the fear and panic that I'm experiencing in this moment is my brain keeping me safe, but it's kicking in at 40%, and I have a lot left before I'm going to die. I'm going to be just fine.
Yeah.
And it's very weird, like a rational thing to think that I'm going to die in a Spartan race because I'm running really hard. Like logically, that seems really weird and weak and whatever, but it happens in those moments for me.
Sure.
And it's just real. And I think it's interesting too, what Hillary was talking about earlier, just how you are when you come home from your backcountry trips. And I think you're speaking to something powerful too, which is that I think for me, going in the backcountry is a spiritual practice for me. I mean, it is my church.
Yeah.
And it's been winter here for much too long, and I feel like I haven't been to church in a while. And it doesn't have to be hunting, but just getting out a weekend, or quote unquote shed hunting, which is just an excuse to walk around.
You were saying the shed hunting. I mean, we're getting snow right now, and so everybody's kind of on hold as much as we want to be out shed hunting.
And so there's that component of being in the backcountry that's a little different than like a Spartan race. Because a bad day of hunting, an arduous day of hunting with bad weather, I mean, you need some mental toughness, but it's also very nourishing and very, very spiritually nourishing for me in a way that like a Spartan race is definitely not. So there is a part of hunting and being in the mountains that it brings that level of just peace and grounding,
right?
That sort of evens out a lot of the stuff too. So it's a different beast, it really is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it is hard to explain sometimes, like when you come back from a trail. I mean, my wife's just starting to get it now. I've tried to explain to her for years what you get out of being in the mountains. And, I feel super fortunate and lucky to just know what you get out of it. A lot of people don't. A lot of people have never had opportunities to go spend time in the mountains or see what, personally what they'll get out of that alone time. And they'll never get that. Maybe they're caught up in the city and they just never have had anybody show them that that's even an option or an opportunity. So, oftentimes I just feel fortunate that I know about it. I know it exists, so I'm going to take advantage of it because I know it exists. And too bad that not everybody else does. But, it's that important. And once you've experienced it, you realize how important it is and what you get out of it, what a better person it makes you. And fortunate enough for me, I've got a wife who's seen that, what I get out of it, and she respects that. Yeah, and I think, endurance athletes, hunters, people that get to go spend a lot of time outside, we're afforded all these opportunities. Who knows what we would be without those? Like, what would we be if we didn't have public lands to go hike around on all day, or if we didn't have Spartan races to go let off some steam and all that kind of thing? Who would we be? I know I'd be a grouchy SOB, I'll tell you that much, if I didn't have hunting as an outlet.
And I even grew up in Michigan, where I didn't really experience public land in the way that I do now. Like, it was a dream for me to move, to figure out a way financially to be able to move to Montana and raise my kids here and be able to do what we do on public land. Like, the idea that I would go hunting on public land is very weird to a lot of people in Michigan, because there's not a lot of public land, first of all. And then the little chunks that there were, there was a ton of hunting pressure.
Yeah.
Just a lot of people trying to hunt the same little parcel of land. And so growing up there, it was just a very different experience versus coming out here in the vastness of the public land. I mean, there's many trips that I go on where I'll be gone 5 to 7 days and I won't see another human being.
Yeah.
And that blows my mind. And I am so grateful. Like, it's unbelievable what we get to experience out here.
You get spoiled out here. You totally forget about that.
Yeah. Especially here in Montana.
Yeah.
Where you still go out and you feel at times like you're the first person to ever step foot in this spot. I still get that in all kinds of, these different wilderness areas in Montana and Idaho. It's pretty cool. It's unique, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Jordan, anything else?
We've run this a little long.
It's been good.
Give us your information. Where can people find you? I know you got Humble Foods and all that. So,
yeah, I have many projects.
Yeah.
I have a little Instagram project, just Jordan Reasoner.
Okay.
I just like to post stories on there and stuff. And then, we have SCD Lifestyle if you need poop help. Steve and I have a little project over there.
Okay.
And then we've started Humble Foods, which is backcountry paleo dinners. And so you can grab more information and get on our email list about that over at eathumble.com. And then we're on Instagram at eathumble as well. So more updates to come. That's coming very soon. It's exciting.
It's good stuff,
It
folks.
is exciting.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm looking forward to it when they come out on the market. So
yeah.
Perfect.
Well, we appreciate you
it.
letting us into your home and sharing your story with us. And it's been fun.
Yeah, it's finally good time. Meet you.
It's good to hang out with good people, and I'm just grateful that you took the time. I made the cut. on the Bozeman trip. But you fit me in. You fit me in. And,
Bozeman is an interesting place now. I feel like we could spend weeks here talking to people. Like
I say it all the time. This is where all the cool kids come now.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody.
It didn't used to be like that, but it seems to be like that now. But no, Ryan was like, you were on the top of the list for sure. We've had this planned for a while.
Yeah.
So
I was super looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan.